Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Police Brutality Podcast. Today, we will be talking about abuse of power, and our resident expert today will be Gabby Trinato.
Hi, I'm Gabby. We're mostly going to be looking at abuse of power in like a private setting, as in like family. The main thing to take that I took away from like my research and stuff is that it's estimated that at the minimum 40% of police officers are like abusive and controlling in their family settings. Like the statistic was like over 40% of officers participate in intimate partner violence, and and then the one of the biggest things, one of the biggest factors in these domestic violence and private abuse of power situations is authoritarian spillover, which is basically when they take this like um, controlling, I'm I'm the person with more power attitude, and they take it from their work into their home, which is where it then escalates to like abuse of any kind. Do you guys have any questions?
What was
Uh,
the statistic you gave? Was it 40% or 50?
It was at the minimum of 40% because from the
40?
study I looked at, it was taken from police officers basically telling on themselves, like confessing.
Mhm.
So out of all of the officers that this woman had interviewed, like at the lower estimate was 40% of them confessed to um, participating in intimate partner violence.
That's crazy. That's a high number. And
yeah,
for
Uh, and
like
it's
they're
like the
confessing
low
on
ball.
themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And so people think it's much more closer to 50 or 60% because obviously these were just people who confessed.
it's self-reported, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
So that doesn't even take into account everybody that's not reporting.
hmm
Yeah. So people think it's probably at least like up to 25% higher than that statistic.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so you talked about a spillover from them taking their abuse of power from their workplace into their home environment. Do you think there's a possibility that police departments hire people with abusive characteristics, maybe for like I'm not
I
sure
think it
how like
is. I think it is possible because we've talked about how they're trained in the police academies to be very assertive, and their personalities need to be more like domineering over other people because they think that fear and strength is the only way to get people to respond. So it's entirely possible that just the training and the job draws in people with these types of abusive personality aspects or even just behaviors.
It could
yeah.
also be developed, right?
Yeah, it could also be developed, and the authoritarian spillover is basically just like them saying, "Oh yeah, they're taking the control and like the power that they have in their job, like the you follow my orders and no one else's orders type attitude into their home, which then turns abusive because that's not productive in a home setting."
Yeah, it's not a healthy relationship that you would want to have with someone.
Yes.
Definitely not.
It could also be that like they kind of get no consequences. Like if a police officer's wife who's being domestically abused, they go and like file a report. Those police officers that work at that station probably know that police officer and they probably cover it up for him. So kind of
Yeah.
like they get no consequence for doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a whole other aspect of it is that
Hmm.
even the people who do get reported don't get punished. There's no sense of accountability when they do act in these wrong ways.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, like, a personal story of mine is my father he is a probation officer. So he isn't a police officer, but a probation officer, but he does work with police officers sometimes. And he got this sort of attitude where I can do no wrong. I'm always in the right. You're in the wrong. And it totally just like showed in a bunch of different aspects of me and my mom and my sister's lives. I remember my mom was telling me about this one time where he was supposed to watch over me and my sister for a weekend, and she was at this event trying to help set up for like a dinner party, and he decided that he didn't want to take care of us. And so at like 9 o'clock at night, when my mom was like pre-setting up the stuff for the day before with a group of people, he packed me and my sister into his car, and he drove over to like the place where the stuff was at, and he spotted like some random lady walking into the building, and he was like, "Hey, do you know?" And then he said my mom's name, and the lady was like, "Yeah, I know her." And he was like, "Oh, okay, these are her daughters. I'm dropping them off for her." And the lady was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I could totally take them to her." And he was just like, "Oh, okay." And then he took us out of the car, handed us off to this lady, and then drove away. And one, my mom didn't even know we were there. And then two, it was just like he is so lucky that that lady actually knew us, because he just left us with some random lady that he saw on the street, and we were in like a neighborhood, so it could have been incredibly easy for us to get kidnapped. And when the lady went up to my mom, he was like, "Hey, your ex dropped your kids off." My mom was like, "What the hell?" And it was just like a whole situation, because my mom was just like, "I can't even report him for negligence because the lady did actually know her." But it was just like, even if she did have a leg to stand on, because she did, obviously, it was like he was extremely irresponsible. He didn't even check if she actually knew us. Like, he gave the lady my mom's name, so she could have just lied and ran with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my mom was just like, I couldn't report him or do anything about it. Like, the only thing I could do was like bring it up in the divorce when they were fighting for custody.
Yeah, but even then, courts sometimes, from what we've seen before, are very one-sided when it comes to anybody that has to do with law enforcement or holding up the law.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that was a huge issue. And then another issue is that he had this habit of like stalking the outside of our house, where he would drive by at night to see if there were any cars over at our house. And there was this one time where my cousin, who lives out of state, was staying with us for Christmas break around Christmas. And so his car was in our driveway. And the next time I saw my father, he was saying like, well, first he talked to my mom, and he got all up in her face saying like, "I can't believe you have a man around the girls." Like, this was only for, I was like 13 and my sister was about 8. And he was just like, "I can't believe you have a man around the girls in the house. Like, how can you trust some random man that you're dating?" One, my mom wasn't even dating, and he made all these assumptions. And my mom just looked at him, and she was just like, "Okay, so one, you were stalking outside of our house because my cousin didn't get there until like 11. And then two, he didn't even check like the license plate to see like if it was out of state or anything like that." And then after, my mom was just like, "You're so dumb. That's my nephew." He was just like, "Oh, well, I didn't know." And it's just like, well, yeah, no, duh. Like, why are you stalking outside of the house at night, in the middle of the night? And then it's not like he did this multiple times, and my mom was just like, "Yeah, I can't even report him because he's just gonna say, what, is it illegal for me to like drive by the house?"
Yeah.
Was he still working as a probation officer at that time?
He still is one.
Oh, jeez.
And then there's multiple times of how irresponsible he's been with his gun, like the gun that he has for work. Like, one time he wanted to take it into Olive Garden with us.
Wow.
And I told him like, I used the F-bomb, but I was like, "You're effing ridiculous. Why the hell do you need to take your work gun into Olive Garden? We're just having dinner there." And he would be like, "Oh, well, like, what if there's like an emergency and something, like I could act? And I was just like, no, you can't. If I was just like, if anything, you just make the situation worse.
Yeah.
If someone's really robbing an Olive Garden, what do you think you can actually do in that situation?
Aren't those signs or symptoms of like PTSD?
It's,
I would
You know,
argue.
I would say, okay,
you could argue that, but
yeah.
then the way it
Like,
seems
and it's not just
is
that.
not.
Okay.
Because he used to wave that thing around all the time. Like he used to say that, I remember him telling me once, like, you see this makes me important.
Okay.
It was very much it's like a crutch for his self-esteem, self-confidence.
And I
Like,
feel like it's a common thing for cops to want to carry their weapon wherever they go.
Because they feel very vulnerable without it.
Most
yeah.
likely, they've been
Yeah.
taught to rely on it. So
Yeah.
My thing is like he's not even a cop, he's a probation officer.
Right.
He didn't go through the police academy.
Yeah, just because like just from those actions, it's like if anyone heard that, you would want him to go through some kind of psychological evaluation to see if he should be fit to be some kind of like law enforcement officer. But since he's still working in the force, it's like evidently that's not happening.
yeah.
And then no one would ever believe
Mm.
no one would ever believe me, my mom, and my sister over this. Because then, like,
Yeah.
there was this one time where he actually broke into our house. My mom was off doing something, and she had my cousin babysitting, and it was around like 11 o'clock at night, and we had like all of the lights off, and my sister was in bed. I was about 10 or 11.
Wow.
And my cousin and I were watching The Little Mermaid in the living room, and we heard someone trying to like sneak around the side of the house. And my cousin was like, my cousin turned off the TV, and we ran into the room my sister and I shared. And my cousin was like, oh, okay, just like get on your bed, and like she laid down next to me, and we were just like listening to like the doors being rattled and stuff like that. And then we don't really like, he obviously had a key that he wasn't supposed to have because he did end up getting into the house. And he was in the living room, and he had a flashlight, and I remember seeing the light going down the hall, moving down the hall, and he's like walking in, and the next thing he yells out, who's there? I have a gun. You better come out right now. And he walks to the door of me and my sister's room, and he points the gun and his flashlight at me and my cousin because we were both on my bed. And I was like pretending to be asleep, but like I obviously like wasn't asleep. And then he saw it was me and my cousin, and then he like booked it out of the house.
Wow.
And it was just like, what the hell? That's like obviously those are just like little things that my family couldn't report. It's so easy for him to say, I didn't do that.
Yeah. I guess that comes back to like the accountability stuff we were talking about before. Like no one, as a police officer, it's so difficult to be held accountable for anything, really, anything you do wrong, because you're gonna be protected regardless of what you do.
Yeah. And then it's just there's so many like other things that happen, but then it's just that casual, like I'm gonna break into their house. It's like, who do you think is gonna be in there?
Yeah, and it's like he has no right as an individual to do that. Like regardless of whether you're a police officer or like some kind of law enforcement officer, you cannot just walk into, someone else's house.
Yeah, there's definitely an invasion of privacy there.
Yeah.
Especially when it's not called for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was just the whole situation where family members and partners of people who do abuse their power, they can't say anything. Like they can't report it because even if they do report it, they're not going to be believed, or it's going to be tossed aside, and it's not worth it in some situations. My mom was just like, I'll document everything, and then when we go to court for custody, I'll lay everything out all at once in front of the judge, and that's just how it's gonna be, because she can't make a report because no one's gonna believe her.
Right. You can't report to the same department. That's
And as it was, my father did try to brush it aside during their divorce. During the divorce hearing, my mom would tell us one of the stories, and he'd be like, "That never happened," or he'd be like, "I don't remember that happening. I have no recollection of doing that." And then my mom would just be like, "No, like, go ask Abby. She remembers. Go ask my niece. She remembers."
wow.
So he would just deny it all the way. And just the fact that he did that a couple years down the line, it was just like, what would he have done if my mom had reported it? He would have denied it.
Right. And whose word are they gonna take? You know,
Yeah.
is he still harassing you guys now?
I haven't spoke to him in about a year, but he likes to come to our house and like randomly knock on the door, ring the doorbell. And he'll stand there and repeatedly ring the doorbell and knock on the door for like at least 10 minutes at a time, because he thinks he could annoy us into opening the door for him.
There's just looks like some huge sense of entitlement, I feel like.
Yeah.
Superiority complex, I think, stemming from
Yeah. So it's, and then my mom says she wants to report him for, she wants to go to the police and go through like the steps to prevent him from even being able to come within 10 feet of the house. And so, I mean, we're not home right now. Anytime it's like, there's like this fear that he's going to be like creeping around the neighborhood. He's going to be like driving by the neighborhood, because he doesn't live near us. And he goes to like the gym a mile away from my house. And it's like, why do you need to go there? There's a gym closer to your house. I'm positive there's a gym where you work.
Yeah, that sounds very strategized.
And then he used to, so he doesn't have my number. He has my sister's number. And he would like text her saying, "I want to see you." And then when my sister's like, he'd send her this when she was in school, right? Like back when she was in high school, he sent her like, "Oh, I want to see you." And she'd be like, I'm doing like tutoring. Like, I can't just like drop everything to go see you when you want me to. And then it was just like, she was busy. She didn't have time to just like drop everything. And then at that point, it was just like the entitled way he would say it would just like put her off even more, because she knows he's just going to try to fight her about something, fight with her about anything he thinks of. So he would start to circle around the high school, around her high school.
Jesus.
Which is close to our house.
See,
so
anyone
he used
else
to like
you can
circle the area.
Anyone else you
Yeah.
can call the cops on, but I guess with this situation you can't.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like they know they can get away with it because it's family or ex-family. I'm related to them. I have a right to do this. And it's like, no, you don't. It's them trying to get back at me. And it's like, no, it's not. We just don't want to deal with you right now.
Do you think there's anything that, like the system? How do you think we should change the system so then like this kind of stuff won't be happening to like families with police officers?
I think it's like the whole accountability talk that we had before about how officers that know the perpetrator should not be handling the case at all. The station should not be handling the case at all. The officer shouldn't be able to just be like, I don't remember doing that. They shouldn't be able to dismiss it so easily.
Right.
Like they should fear the consequences of their actions, especially if they're against their own family. Because I would think that unless there's some crazy revenge plan against an individual, I don't think family would really lie about stuff like that.
Right.
And so it's like all of these people are reporting, yes, officers do abuse their power in private. Like, yes, my partner. And then I'm talking about like, abuses in all ranges. I'm talking about like domestic violence. I'm talking about like verbal abuse, emotional abuse, like this, not just physical abuse, the stalking type abuse as well. It's all of that should be punished harshly, especially because they're an officer. How are you enforcing the law on someone else and you're breaking it?
Right. And I feel like those type of individuals should not be in the law enforcement. Just
Exactly, they shouldn't be. If they're
Yeah.
participating in behaviors like this on their free time, it's like, what are they doing in other situations? Like, how else are they acting? If they're abusing their partner and stalking their kids, do you think they'd be more prone to violence during their work time?
Yeah.
Do officers have to take like an oath before they get like sworn into their job, basically? Like, you know, kind of like how doctors have to take an oath before they put on their white coat.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's just like a general, you're not supposed to break the law type thing. I remember my father telling me about how when you get your work done, your job, you're supposed to have it in a box with like a lock combination, especially if you're taking it to your house. You're not just supposed to have it lying around, or you're supposed to even leave it at work. Like you're not supposed to take it home at all. I mean, obviously he broke this rule, but I remember him saying something about that. Like it has like a box with a lock combination, and it's not supposed to. You're supposed to keep it at your desk or at your job or wherever that they store that stuff. And then if you had to take it home, you were supposed to bring the box or something with it. But no, yeah, he never did that. He would just like bring the gun and put it like in his what do you call it? Your dashboard, right near
Near the
your
wheel.
control stick. You know how there's like the armrest that has like a compartment underneath.
Yeah, I don't
He
know.
used to put it there. And I remember one time he left me alone in his car for whatever reason. I don't remember where we were anymore. I was like a freshman in high school. I remember I just like opened the hidden little storage area. I just remember opening it and like grabbing his gun and being like, I don't get what the big deal is. But it was like just the fact that I was able to get my hands on his gun that easily.
Yeah, that's scary.
Is pretty terrifying.
What do you think we should do? Because obviously the police are not going to do anything about this. What do you think we or anyone like I guess our listeners? What do you think we should do to I guess address this issue?
I don't know. I think we should, if people who go through this type of situation where a family member or a friend is talking about how their partner abuses their power, I think we should take it seriously and not dismiss it. Because that's something that I see a lot of people say is that they'll be like, oh, yeah, my parents told me, like, oh, it's just because he's a cop. Or it's like, oh, he's just doing what he's taught. And it's like, no, that's not a valid answer.
Right.
There's no excuse.
We should bring about more awareness of like this issue because I know a lot of people like to focus on like cops and public violence, but like you said, like the abuse of like the private abuse of power isn't really ever talked about in like mainstream media.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely think we need to have this conversation more because it'll help people who are going through the situation currently. Like I remember seeing a TikTok where someone was, oh my god, I think it was like a white family from one of the southern states, and the dad was a cop, and there were 3 kids minimum. One was recording, and then 2 younger kids, both underneath the age of 10. They were like playing around in the backyard, and like one of them was a girl, and she was like screaming, like having fun. And the boy says something, and then the dad says like, "Shut your damn mouth, boy," and then he reaches for his gun, but like obviously he doesn't have his gun, but he reaches for it.
You said this was
It's
on the
like,
TikTok?
yeah, it was such an automatic reaction. like everyone was just like, holy shit, he like reached for his imaginary gun on his own kid.
How much do you think this is affected by like how masculinity is kind of like enforced? Well, not enforced. How do I describe this?
Toxic masculinity.
Yes, toxic masculinity and how it's affecting, I guess, men.
I totally think it's related because I feel like men whose self-esteem and self-image and self-confidence are damaged and the type that rely on being like hyper masculine for their confidence, I definitely think they're drawn to jobs like this, where they have power over other people. It's like that. I remember people saying like, all the girls who used to bully me in middle school and high school are now trying to be nurses. People who were like power hungry or wanted to assert themselves over others go into jobs where they have power over other people. They're drawn to those types of jobs, even if they're not passionate about it.
Because I think for them, I'm not trying to defend them, but for them, it's their only way to find a sense of stability.
And that's where the conversation of mental health and destigmatizing going to therapy is. Because if they went to therapy to get help on these self-confidence issues, they wouldn't rely on toxic masculinity or even toxic femininity to gain confidence.
Were there any reports on like women being violent at home, like female cops?
Oh yeah, I think in the full document there are like women who talked about being more controlling with their kids. There are women who also abuse their male partners, especially because women are more likely to do the stalking, or not more likely, but they're able to get away with more of the stalking type behaviors, I would say.
How so?
Because when you look at like even just standard bullying in schools, females tend to use more relational bullying.
Oh yeah, okay.
Females tend to use more relational bullying, and so I feel like that could obviously transfer over. Females are more likely to do not the physical abuse.
I think they're more discreet about it.
Yeah, girls are scary.
Yeah.
They're more the stalking, like I'll make multiple accounts to stalk you type, but so are men. Some men do all of them at the same time.
Some guys go crazy. Yeah.
It's just like everyone, I guess you would say bad apples among every demographic.
I think everyone's just trying to find like a sense of control over their own lives, and just those are the people that go about it the wrong way.
Yeah, it's they fall back on or lean on these toxic mindsets that they're exposed to.
Right.
It's a hard thing to try to repair, I guess, because I mean I see the importance of someone working in law enforcement to feel like they need to gain control of a situation. I understand how that would factor in and how it would be an important thing, but I think the problem stems from when they bring that attitude, that demeanor home, or even in a public setting. Like it doesn't even have to be abuse in a private setting. Abuse in a public setting, you see cops several times trying to manipulate a situation to go a certain way, a way that they've already decided that it's going to go because they need to get their quota in, or because I don't know, I've heard, I don't know how true it is, but when a cop is closer to their shift ending, that they're more likely to let something slide because they don't want to go back to the station and do paperwork and stuff. And to me, that's, I mean, how can you decide who slides and who doesn't because your shift is almost over? I mean, there's no, I don't know.
There's no consistency.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to go. There's no consistency, and when you lose consistency, like everything else that's supposed to be uniform, just it falls apart. It falls apart, and that's why it's so easy to take advantage and manipulate situations, because it's the dynamic, I guess, of policing. It's just it's so easy to abuse your power when there's it's hard to prove that you're abusing it.
Right. It's a power dynamic as well, because
Yeah.
we as civilians can't do anything really to cops, while cops can basically do whatever they want with us in a way.
Yeah.
So, what if you guys, or like people who are being who are victims of domestic violence by police officers, how effective do you think would it be for them to like report to news outlets?
Honestly, I think social media has been honestly a type of blessing, I guess you could say, because like look at the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot
Yeah.
of the videos and stuff go. We're only seeing a lot of this now because people have phones with cameras and they can upload it in a second
Yeah.
onto social media. Where before it was like someone could see something and they could like report it, but
Yeah.
because there was no physical evidence or there's no evidence where someone can watch it and not deny anything, where a lot of people or like officers who were abusing their power in those situations could be like, no, that's not how it happened.
Yeah, but I think media can be a very powerful tool to pressure the police departments to actually like, do right.
Yeah, I mean, even just looking at other situations, such as when I was at ELAC, a lot of I remember seeing some post on like Instagram saying it would be a picture of a guy saying, "Look out for this guy. He's taking pictures of girls without consent, and he's trying to take pictures of like underneath girls' skirts. He's tried stalking some of them home from campus, tried following them. Be aware of this guy." And it's like even just that type of situation, I wouldn't have known about this dude unless I saw the post.
Right.
And so it's a wealth of knowledge. And I mean, some people can say cancel culture is its own monster that has its good and its bad because
It
people
does.
abuse it.
Yes.
I think there is like a positive side that people can't deny, where knowledge of a person's misactions that shouldn't be allowed to be swept under the rug can be shown. Even just this podcast, even though we're only doing this for these few episodes, like this is the first time I've talked to people about my father's actions that weren't family or close friends who were there when I was going through it, because it's something I just had to like deal with and then brush aside.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that was intense.
Yeah, no, it's just like you traumatized me.
Yeah.
And you never got in trouble for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's good. Like, I mean, there's probably a bunch of other like kids who have parents as cops that have felt like the same kind of abusive power. And if it, social media is powerful enough where you can connect and share those stories, and the rest of the world kind of listens and they're like, oh, well, if this is happening with every police officer, then there's a problem.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I remember seeing stories on Reddit where it's like some kids saying, I don't understand why my dad's acting like this. And it's like you read the post of them saying like everything that their parent, the parent who's a police officer, is doing and enforcing on them. And everyone's just like, this is abuse. Like, and then you feel so bad because it's like all the advice in the world that you give that kid or that teenager, you can give them all the advice you want, but in the end, it's like their parent's a cop. They can deny anything. The kid could go to the school and the parent could be let off with just a warning and then turn it around on the kid the moment they get home. And it's more difficult for them to fight their way out because the parent's a cop. There's also just like the typical like controlling behaviors. Like I've seen stories where people who were ex-military are super controlling of their kids, where it's like they set their bedtimes, they decide their kids' haircuts, they decide their kids' extracurriculars, they decide how much time or what their kid watches on TV if they get TV. I remember seeing a post where a kid was like, "Yeah, my stepdad took away my mattress for 3 months." and I had to sleep on the floor.
Wow.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's just like the kid was just like, I told my school counselor, and all he did was like beat me up when we got home after.
Yeah, that's the fear, isn't it? Whenever you're being, abused, you want to tell someone, but once whoever's abusing you finds out, they're just gonna make things worse.
Yeah, and then there's like the added layer of when they build up build themselves up to tell someone, and then the person either doesn't take them seriously, or the parent finds out and it's excused, then everything just turns worse, and it totally crushes their self-esteem, and totally crushes their confidence, or it totally crushes their faith in the system in general.
Right.
Faith
in people, probably.
And then it opens a lot of kids to that type of controlling behavior and abuse, opens up kids for abusive relationships. I know the stat is much higher for little girls. They're a lot more likely to end up in an abusive marriage if they grew up in abusive households. And then it's up to them to break that cycle of abuse, or it's up to them to like be more weary of falling into these like traps. Okay, yeah, I would just say that the important takeaway from this conversation is that people need to talk about it more, like not just the public displays of abusive power, but the private displays. And the people who do abuse their power need to be held accountable and need to be punished, and the victims need to be believed, and something needs to change.
Well, that is the end of our last episode of our police brutality podcast. Like I mentioned in the beginning, the ultimate goal of these discussions is not to provide, it's just to establish certain viewpoints and just educate any of you guys listening about any of these subjects. And I just hope that after listening to these podcasts, you guys are more willing to go and search out this sort of information, and hopefully support anyone who is going through any sort of domestic violence or abuse by police, and also be able to hopefully make some change in our society in America.